The marble floors of Viktor Petrov's private mansion reflected the golden light of 1,000 hidden bulbs, each one precisely calibrated to showcase the billionaire's most prized possessions. In the East Wing, behind reinforced glass that cost more than most people's homes, two creatures existed in a world of captive perfection. The bear, a massive grizzly named Titan by the only man who had ever known his name, stood nearly 9 feet tall when he reared up on his hind legs. His fur was the color of burnished copper, thick and luxurious, groomed weekly by handlers who feared him even through the barriers. The mountain lion, sleeker and more elegant, paced the adjacent enclosure with the restless energy of a born hunter, confined to a prison of his own magnificence. His tawny coat rippled with muscle, his amber eyes holding an intelligence that seemed almost human. These animals had been purchased from the black market, smuggled across continents in climate-controlled containers, their transfer facilitated by people whose names appeared in no records. Viktor Petrov had wanted them because he could have them, not out of love for wildlife, but out of an obsession with possession. The world's rarest wines, the world's rarest art, the world's rarest animals. He collected them all with the same emotional indifference with which a collector gathers stamps. The bear and the mountain lion had been domesticated, or rather broken. Raised in captivity, fed premium cuts of meat delivered by handlers, their aggressive instincts dulled by the monotony of their surroundings. They had never known the weight of earth beneath their paws, never tasted wind that carried the scent of freedom, never experienced the primal joy of a hunt. What they had known was each other. Against all logic, against every warning from the animal handlers, the two predators had formed an unlikely bond. Perhaps it was the shared despair of captivity that drew them together. Perhaps it was the simple fact that they were the only two creatures in their cages that could understand the particular loneliness of their situation. Every afternoon, when the handlers left and the mansion fell quiet, they would position themselves on opposite sides of their shared wall, the bear leaning his massive head against the glass, the mountain lion pressing his smaller frame against the barrier, and they would simply be present to one another. The bear had learned to read the mountain lion's moods by the position of his tail. The mountain lion understood the rumbling sounds the bear made, low vibrations that traveled through the glass, a language of companionship that transcended species. This was their world, captive, controlled, and yet somehow, in each other's presence, a little less hollow. The explosion came at 3:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in October, though the animals had no concept of days or dates. What they knew was the sudden, violent rupture of everything familiar. A contractor working in the East Wing's expansion project had made a catastrophic error, a misplaced electrical conduit, a failure to follow blueprints, a moment of human carelessness that sent a cascade of concrete and steel tumbling through the mansion's supporting walls. The shockwave rattled the reinforced glass of both enclosures, sending cracks spiderwebbing across surfaces that were supposed to be unbreakable. The bear roared, a sound so primal, so full of rage and terror that it seemed to shake the foundations of the room itself. He charged the damaged wall, using the full force of his considerable weight to test its integrity. The mountain lion, triggered by the bear's distress, began to pace with frantic urgency, his movements sharp and precise, like a caged predator who suddenly sensed escape was possible. Security would arrive in minutes. Viktor Petrov would assess the damage. Engineers would reinforce the walls. The captive life would continue, perhaps slightly modified, but fundamentally unchanged. Unless something else happened first. The bear, in his panic and rage, struck the cracked glass at precisely the point of maximum weakness. The pane didn't shatter so much as explode, fragments cascading down like artificial rain. The barrier between the bear and the rest of the mansion dissolved in seconds. For the first time in 7 years, the bear felt unfiltered air on his face. He felt the texture of the marble floor, cool and smooth beneath his claws. He felt what freedom tasted like, at least in its immediate vicinity. He could run. The realization hit him like a physical force. He could actually run. But he didn't move toward the exits. Instead, he turned to face the reinforced glass of the mountain lion's enclosure. His eyes met the amber gaze of his only friend, and something wordless passed between them. A question, perhaps. An invitation. The mountain lion had spent his entire captive life wondering what it would feel like to charge through this barrier, to feel it give way beneath his power. But he had also spent his entire captive life with the bear, and the promise of freedom meant nothing if it meant losing the only thing that had ever mattered to him. "Come," the bear seemed to say, though no sound emerged. The mountain lion did not hesitate. He backed up several paces, his muscles coiling like springs, and then he exploded forward with the full force of a predator built by nature to hunt. The glass was reinforced, but it was already damaged from the structural failure, and it was no match for 1,000 pounds of pure feline power. The barrier burst outward, scattering across the marble in a chaotic explosion of fragments. They stood together in the rubble of their captivity. Two apex predators, domesticated for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be wild. The bear was larger, more powerful, but the mountain lion was faster. Together, they were something terrifying and magnificent. Somewhere in the mansion, alarms began to scream. Red lights started flashing in sequences designed to alert security to a catastrophic failure. But by then, the bear and the mountain lion were already moving. They ran through the mansion's corridors with the single-minded purpose of creatures who understood on some primal level that they had mere minutes to escape. The bear's powerful legs covered ground in massive strides, and the mountain lion moved alongside him with liquid grace, his smaller body darting ahead to scout, then falling back to match his companion's pace. Behind them, they could hear the thundering of human feet, the shouts of security personnel, the barking of dogs trained to stop them. But none of these sounds mattered. For the first time, there was something bigger than fear. There was hope. They burst through a service exit into the pre-dawn darkness, and suddenly, there was earth beneath their paws. Not polished marble or cold glass, but actual ground, dirt, grass. The physical reality of a world that extended far beyond the boundaries of Viktor Petrov's collected possessions. The mountain lion took the lead, his instincts sharper in this new terrain, guiding them toward the distant tree line that bordered the mansion's sprawling estate. The bear followed, a locomotive of muscle and determination, powerful enough to bulldoze through obstacles, but agile enough, when he needed to be, to follow the feline's lead. Gunshots echoed behind them. Once, twice, 3 times, the sounds of human desperation attempting to reclaim its possessions. The bear felt a sting along his left shoulder, the searing pain of a bullet grazing fur and skin, but he didn't slow down. The mountain lion, smaller and faster, had already vanished into the shadows of the tree line, and the bear followed the path of disturbed vegetation that marked his friend's passage. They ran through the first night and into the next day. They ran through terrain that became progressively wilder and less controlled, from the groomed forests that surrounded Petrov's estate to actual wilderness, untamed and vast. Neither of them had ever experienced anything like it. The air tasted different here, carrying scents that triggered responses in their brains that had been dormant for years. The sounds were different too. Not the artificial hum of climate control and electric lights, but the genuine symphony of the living world. Birds singing, insects chirping, the distant sound of water moving.
On the second day, they stumbled into a protected preserve, a vast swath of land set aside by federal law as a wildlife sanctuary where hunting was forbidden and human interference was minimal. The transition happened gradually. The trees became denser, the landscape more rugged, and they began to encounter other animals. Deer scattered at their approach. A family of wolves watched them from a distance, sizing them up, then deciding these two were competitors rather than prey. The bear and the mountain lion finally stopped when they came to a clearing beside a rushing stream. The bear collapsed onto the earth, his flanks heaving with exertion, his eyes glazed with the exhaustion of running beyond any limit he had ever known. The mountain lion circled once, then twice, before settling beside his friend, close enough to touch. They had been running for nearly 36 hours straight. They had covered over 50 miles. They were deeper into true wilderness than they had ever been, far beyond the resources of Viktor Petrov, far beyond the boundaries of human control. For the first time in their lives, they were truly free.
The bear woke to find his ribs aching with a deep, bone-deep soreness that suggested he had been running on pure adrenaline for far too long. The mountain lion was already awake, perched on a rock above their makeshift rest area, watching the forest with an intensity that spoke of instincts reasserting themselves after years of dormancy. The problem was immediate and fundamental. They were starving. In captivity, the bear had been fed premium cuts of meat on schedule. His body had grown accustomed to receiving nourishment at regular intervals with no effort required. Now, for the first time, his hunger wasn't a signal to wait for a handler to arrive with a prepared meal. It was a command from his animal brain that said, "Hunt or perish." The bear rose to his feet and began to walk along the stream, testing the water, looking for fish. He had never fished. He had never hunted anything. Every meal of his adult life had been provided by humans. His instincts told him what to do. He remembered vague genetic memories of salmon runs and bears wading through rivers. But the execution was another matter entirely. He stood in the shallow water for nearly 2 hours, lunging at shadows, missing every time. Fish scattered at his approach, darting away from this massive predator who didn't seem to understand the basic mechanics of hunting them. The mountain lion, watching from the bank, made a sound that might have been a laugh if mountain lions could laugh. Then, with the efficient grace that had been bred into his bones, he waded into the water and caught a trout in his jaws within minutes. He brought it to the bank and shared it with the bear, not out of necessity, but out of something that felt dangerously close to friendship. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Over the following weeks, the bear began to learn. He practiced standing in the river, waiting for the moment when a salmon would leap the cascade and he could swat it to shore. He learned by failure, by persistence, by the brute force of trial and error. Slowly, he caught his first fish, then his second. Then, one afternoon, he caught 3 in a single hour and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pride. The mountain lion was a superior hunter by every measure. His body was built for stealth and explosive speed. He could stalk prey for hours, reading the terrain, understanding the behavior of deer and rabbits and mountain goats. He taught the bear by example, showing him where to find berries and nuts, where small animals sheltered, where water was fresh and clean. In return, the bear provided something the mountain lion needed: companionship in a landscape of dangerous solitude. Because for all the beauty of the wilderness, it was also profoundly, brutally lonely. The other bears and mountain lions they occasionally encountered were not friends. They were competitors for territory, rivals for food, potential threats. In a landscape where every creature was fundamentally alone, the bear and the mountain lion clung to each other with an intensity that bordered on desperation.
They established a home base in a cave that had clearly been used by other bears in the past. The mountain lion contributed nothing to the physical shelter, but he contributed something more valuable: awareness. He understood predators and predation in ways the bear was still learning. When wolves came too close, the mountain lion would position himself between them and the cave, his body language making clear that while he might lose a fight, it would be costly enough not to be worth attempting. As the seasons changed, the bear grew stronger, more capable, more genuinely wild. His muscles hardened through constant use. His hunting skills improved dramatically. The wound from the bullet that had grazed his shoulder during their escape healed into a thin scar that spoke of violence survived. The mountain lion, for his part, was experiencing something equally profound: connection. In a world where his species was essentially solitary, where the only time a male mountain lion encountered another male was in deadly competition for territory, he had found something he hadn't known existed: a brother who didn't want to kill him. Together, they were remaking themselves. The bear was shedding the remnants of domestication and remembering what it meant to be wild. The mountain lion was learning what it meant to care about another creature's survival alongside his own. They brought fish or rabbits to each other. They shared heat during cold nights. They moved through the forest as a unit, two predators who had learned that survival wasn't a zero-sum game, that there could be abundance enough for both if they were willing to work together. It was a life neither of them could have imagined in captivity, and neither would have chosen to live any other way.
The mountain lion had never been outside his cage before. He had never encountered another mountain lion in his life. He had no framework for understanding territorial disputes, mating season hierarchies, or the primal competitions that determine status in the wild. So when the other mountain lion appeared at their water source on a spring morning, massive, scarred, with the bearing of a creature who had won every conflict it had ever entered, the young mountain lion didn't immediately understand the danger. The warning came from the bear, a rumbling growl that spoke of recognition and concern. But by then, it was too late. The larger cat moved with shocking speed, crossing the distance between them in a bound and driving the younger mountain lion backward with a combination of raw power and experience born from years of territorial struggles. The younger cat was faster, more agile, but he was fighting against centuries of evolutionary disadvantage, a creature who had never learned to truly fight against its own kind. The battle lasted only minutes, but those minutes were an eternity of claw and fang, of blood and desperation. The young mountain lion managed to land several strikes of his own, drawing blood, but they were the clumsy efforts of a novice against a master. By the end, he was on his back, pinned beneath the weight of his opponent, feeling the older cat's jaws positioned against his throat. The bear, watching from mere feet away, made a split-second decision. He roared, a sound so primal and so full of rage that it echoed through the forest like thunder. He charged forward, his massive bulk crossing the ground in powerful strides. The larger mountain lion, recognizing a threat that dwarfed the smaller cat pinned beneath him, released his grip and bounded away into the forest, unwilling to engage with a grizzly bear 10 times his weight. The young mountain lion lay gasping on the ground, covered in blood, his left eye swollen shut, his body a tapestry of wounds. The bear bent down and carefully, gently, lifted him onto his back. It was an awkward position for the bear to carry the cat, but he managed it, moving slowly and deliberately back toward their cave.
The cave became a sanctuary of healing. The bear spent days hunting extra food, bringing back not just the kills the mountain lion needed to sustain himself, but premium cuts, the livers and hearts that contained nutrients crucial for recovery. The mountain lion lay in the cave for over a week, unable to move, his wounds slowly beginning to knit themselves back together.
The bear lay beside him, a massive wall of warmth and presence, communicating through proximity that his friend was not alone. It was during those long days that the mountain lion began to understand something about himself. The pain was intense, yes, but it was also clarifying. The older cat had not just wounded him physically, he had exposed a fundamental inadequacy. The young mountain lion had been trained to be alone, had learned to hunt and move through the forest with grace, but he had never learned to fight like a wild cat fought. He had never learned the brutal mathematics of territorial combat. His nature had been shaped by captivity, by the bear's protection, by a life lived outside the normal hierarchies of his species. He was not fully wild because he had never been forced to become fully wild. But as he healed, something shifted within him. The wounds became a teacher, the pain became a motivation. He began to understand his own body in new ways, to feel where his muscles could move differently, to recognize that his speed and agility were advantages he had been failing to use effectively. When he was finally able to stand, he began to practice. He moved through the forest with new intention, studying his own movements, teaching his body the lessons that combat had inscribed upon him. The bear watched this transformation with what might have been understood as pride. By the time spring had fully transformed into early summer, the mountain lion was not just healed, he was transformed. The casual grace he had possessed before had been refined into something more dangerous, more disciplined. He had lost the softness that came from years of shelter. He had become, in the truest sense of the word, wild. Mating season arrived like a switch being flipped in the mountain lion's brain. His hormones shifted, his body changed, and suddenly the forest became a completely different landscape. He began to mark territory more aggressively, to range farther from their shared cave, to experience a restlessness that the bear had never known. One afternoon, in a clearing beside a rocky outcropping, he encountered the other mountain lion again. This time, the young cat was different. This time he was hunting for territory, not just food. This time he understood what it meant to fight like a wild creature. And this time, there was a female mountain lion watching from the tree line, a witness to the battle that would determine who had the right to pass on his genes. The fight was everything the first engagement had not been. The young mountain lion moved with precision and purpose, using his speed not recklessly but strategically. He understood that the larger cat was more powerful, so he focused on evasion and precision strikes. He used the terrain to his advantage, keeping his opponent perpetually off balance. The larger cat fought with the confidence of a creature who had won every territorial battle of his life. But confidence is not the same as invincibility, and the younger cat was hungrier in ways that went beyond mere appetite. He was fighting for the right to exist as a complete creature, not just a survivor, but a reproducer, not just a guest in the forest, but a full participant in its cycles. The turning point came when the young mountain lion feinted left, then moved right, his jaws finding the larger cat's shoulder at precisely the moment when his opponent was committed to a lunge in the wrong direction. The strike was devastating, not immediately fatal, but enough to cause a shock of pain that disrupted the larger cat's pattern. The fight continued for several more minutes, but the outcome had already been determined. The young mountain lion, driven by hunger and youth and the desperate need to prove himself worthy of the female watching from the trees, pushed harder. He used every technique he had learned, every advantage his smaller size and greater speed provided. When the larger cat finally retreated, slinking into the forest with a limp that suggested a serious injury, the young mountain lion stood victorious in the clearing. His flanks heaved with exertion. His body was covered in new wounds to add to the scars from his previous battles, but his head was high and his eyes were bright. The female emerged from the tree line, approached him with measured steps, and accepted his presence. This was the way of nature.
This was the code that had been written into his DNA millions of years ago. He had proven himself through combat, and now he had the right to pass that code forward.
The bear knew something had changed the moment the mountain lion returned to their cave. There was a different quality to his movements, a satisfaction that went beyond the simple relief of survival. The younger cat had transcended something. He had become what nature had always intended him to be. In captivity, the bear had learned that the mountain lion was important to him. In the early stages of wilderness, he had understood that they needed each other for survival. But now, watching the mountain lion move through their shared space, the bear comprehended something more profound, that his friend was complete in ways that he might never be. The mountain lion belonged to the forest. He was not a creature learning to adapt to it. He was a creature that had been shaped by it over millions of years of evolution. The bear, no matter how wild he became, no matter how many fish he learned to catch, carried something of captivity with him. He had memories of marble floors and prepared meals. He had been shaped by human hands and human choices. But the mountain lion was pure wildness now. He had been reborn. That night, the bear did something he had never done before. He left the cave and walked to the edge of their territory. He stood in the moonlight and roared, a sound that carried across the forest, that resonated with the bedrock beneath the earth itself. It was a sound of acknowledgement and acceptance. It was the bear saying goodbye to the idea that they would always be together in the same way. When he returned to the cave, the mountain lion was waiting. The cat approached him with care, understanding that something significant had shifted. They lay together one final time, as they had done so many nights before, their bodies close, their breathing synchronized. But something had changed. The mountain lion's attention was elsewhere now. Part of him was always listening to the call of the forest, to the pull of other members of his species, to the endless cycle of reproduction and territory and survival that had been written into his being long before the bear and he had ever met. The bear understood. In the language of two creatures who had learned to communicate without words, he said, "Go, live, be fully what you are meant to be." And the mountain lion understood that this was not rejection, but the deepest form of love, the willingness to let go of something precious because something else had become even more precious. For several months after mating season, the mountain lion remained at the cave with the bear, but his presence was different. He would leave for days at a time, ranging farther into the forest, responding to calls that the bear could hear but not answer. The female was out there somewhere, and something was drawing a mountain lion toward her with an intensity that transcended their friendship. The bear found himself alone for increasing stretches of time. He used these periods to perfect his hunting skills, to expand his territory, to fully embrace the role that nature had assigned to him. He was a solitary creature, or at least that's what his species was meant to be. But the loneliness was profound in ways that it might not have been if he had never known companionship. One afternoon, the mountain lion returned to the cave with a new focus in his eyes. The bear recognized it immediately. A decision had been made. The mountain lion approached his old friend, touched his massive head with his own smaller one, and then turned to leave. This time, they both understood. The departure was permanent. The bear did not try to stop him. He did not follow. Instead, he watched as the mountain lion disappeared into the forest, his tawny coat fading into the shadows until he was gone completely. For the first time in years, since before captivity in fact, the bear was truly alone. The seasons turned. Summer faded into autumn, autumn surrendered to winter, and winter gave way to spring once more. The bear found himself adapting to solitude in ways that surprised him. The loneliness was real, but it was also productive. Without the mountain lion to care for, to defend, to check on, he became more focused on his own development. He discovered territories where salmon ran thick during spawning season. He learned to gorge himself on meat and berries and nuts, filling his belly with the abundance that summer and fall provided, storing the calories in his body as insulation and energy for the lean months of winter. He perfected his hibernation, learning to find caves that were perfectly positioned for the long sleep, chambers of stone that held the cold just right. He grew larger and more powerful. His muscles hardened into solid concrete under skin. His scars, from the gunshot wound during their escape, from the occasional fights with other bears over territory and food, became part of his identity. Markers of struggles survived and conflicts won. He became, in every sense of the word, a wild bear. The creature that woke in spring was not the same entity that had walked the marble floors of Viktor Petrov's mansion 5 years earlier. That creature had been broken, domesticated, incomplete. This creature was whole. It was in the 3rd spring, after the mountain lion's departure, that the bear encountered him again. The bear was fishing in their old stream, the one where they had learned to survive together, when he caught the scent, familiar and yet changed, carrying the signature of the mountain lion, but also something else, a female's musk, and something sweeter, smaller. The mountain lion emerged from the tree line with the confident stride of an animal who had found his place in the world. He was leaner now, more scarred, his body bearing the marks of seasons lived in genuine wilderness. Behind him came a female mountain lion, sleek and watchful, and then a kitten, small and curious, exploring the world with the wide eyes of a creature encountering it for the first time. The bear and the mountain lion locked eyes across the distance. Something wordless passed between them. Recognition, acknowledgement, a kind of respect that transcended the need for explanation. The mountain lion had done what nature required. He had found a mate. He had passed on his genes. He had created the next generation that would roam these forests. The bear felt no jealousy, only a strange sense of completion. This was right. This was as it should be. The mountain lion had become fully what nature had always intended him to be. The kitten approached the bear with the fearless curiosity of youth, not understanding the danger that such a massive predator represented. The female mountain lion tensed, prepared to defend her offspring, but the bear merely lowered his great head and allowed the kitten to investigate. There was no threat in this, only a sharing of ancient knowledge from one wild creature to another. After a few moments, the mountain lion turned and led his family deeper into the forest, back to their own territory, back to their own lives. The bear watched them disappear into the shadows. He would see them again occasionally over the years. The mountain lion and his mate would expand their territory. The kitten would grow into a juvenile, learning the skills of predation and survival. Other offspring would follow. The mountain lion's line would continue, spreading through the forest, becoming part of the eternal cycle of life and death and rebirth that had existed here long before Viktor Petrov's mansion, and would continue long after. And the bear would continue his own existence, solitary, powerful, fully wild. A decade after their escape from captivity, the bear was in his prime. He was massive now, with a coat as thick and lustrous as any wild grizzly that had ever roamed these mountains. His face carried the confidence of a creature who had mastered his environment, who had learned every stream and cave and berry patch within his territory, who had fought and won against all comers. He had never taken a mate. He had never had offspring of his own. The domestication of his early years had left him without certain instincts that other bears possessed, or perhaps he had simply never felt the drive that seemed to pull other creatures so strongly. He was content with solitude, with the simple satisfaction of a successful hunt, with the quiet nights in his cave under star-filled skies. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, he would remember the mansion. He would remember the marble floors and the prepared meals and the glass barriers. He would remember the small room where he had first met the mountain lion, both of them trying to find meaning in captivity. But those memories felt like dreams now, experienced by someone else in another life. They had no power over him anymore. He was wild, through and through, a creature of earth and stone and rushing water. The mountain lion had fathered 3 litters over the years. Several of his offspring had become territorial competitors, chased from their father's range into distant forests. Others had not survived the harsh realities of wilderness. But some had thrived, and those offspring would in turn have offspring of their own, carrying forward the mountain lion's genes, his strength, his survival. The bear knew this somehow, though there was no way his conscious mind could have tracked the mountain lion's family tree. He felt it in the way the forest had shifted, in the way new mountain lions increasingly appeared in his territory, young and hungry and desperate to prove themselves against him. He never killed them, these descendants of his friend. When they challenged him, he would respond with sufficient force to demonstrate his dominance, then allow them to retreat with their lives. Perhaps in these encounters, some memory of the mountain lion passed between them, a ghost of the bond that had held between 2 broken creatures learning to be wild together.
The bear stood atop a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of protected forest that had sheltered him for so many years. The morning sun was just beginning to burn away the mist in the valleys below. From somewhere in the distance, a wolf pack howled. Closer, a family of deer moved through the underbrush, alert and cautious. This was his world now. This was what freedom had bought him. Not comfort or safety or certainty, but something far more valuable: authenticity. He was exactly what he had been born to be, no more and no less. The mountain lion was still out there somewhere, probably. The bear occasionally caught his scent on the wind, though they rarely encountered each other directly anymore. They had moved on from each other's lives, as creatures must do. But the bear knew that that connection would always exist, that somewhere in the fabric of this forest lived a creature who remembered him not as a caretaker or a friend, but as a brother. Because that's what they had been to each other. Not pet and owner, not dominant and submissive, not even simply friends. They had been 2 broken creatures learning to be whole together. And in the process, they had taught each other what it meant to be truly alive. The bear took a deep breath of cold mountain air and began to walk down the ridge toward the stream where salmon were running, toward the vast wilderness that spread out before him like an infinite promise. He had been born in captivity, but he had chosen to be wild. He had been broken, but he had learned to heal. And now, in the heart of an endless forest, free from all barriers and chains, he was finally completely himself. The wild heart beats on, eternal and perfect in every creature brave enough to answer its call.